All right, hello and welcome everyone. I'm Benjamin Lee. I have a couple of guests here. Now, depending on how you're listening to this podcast, if you're just listening via audio, then you don't know who I'm referring to. But if you're listening via video on Spotify, Spotify has a new option now where you can now not only listen to a podcast, but you can also see the people like me, my wife Nikki, and my son Joshua,
Hi.
who
Hello.
are who are a part of the podcast. So we're really kind of testing this out. So this has been known, as you know, as the I Can Do with Benjamin Lee podcast. I recently changed the name to the Benjamin Lee podcast. My inspiration really is the woman right next to me, all right? She recently changed her podcast to the Nikki Lee podcast. Joshua and I are very proud of what Nikki is doing. Nikki started her podcast with Julie Adams, and they went for about 8 months, and Nikki is continuing the podcast. Great episodes. If you have not listened to the Nikki Lee podcast, you need to check it out, all right? So what we're doing today, we're just really trying to test some things out. So I appreciate your time. And while we're here, why not give you some thoughts to think about, okay? So one of the things that I would like to share, and then I'm curious what Nikki may have to say. All of this is really impromptu. There's been no prep. Joshua does have something he would like to say at the end of the podcast. So I want to just ask, or really, I guess, share a couple of thoughts. First, let me just say this. I really would love for you to leave me a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you could do that, that'd be great. The more ratings and reviews, the more people will be able to listen. And I'll tell you what, the first 5 people that listen to or leave a rating or a review, I will send you one of my books. I have a number of books that are published on Amazon.com.
That's pretty
and
cool.
So after you leave your rating,
Please leave a review.
after you leave one of those, email me at icandocoaching@pm.me. icandocoaching@pm.me. Show me a copy that you left a rating and a review, and I'll send you something from Amazon, all right? Now, one of the things that I think is always important is really understanding your potential. Nick Saban, after they lost the college championship game, 2 of his top players, they were getting questioned by some of the reporters. And I thought it was really interesting what Nick Saban did here. Before they left, he made sure that he hit the pause button. And Nikki, I don't know if you saw the video or not, but what he did, he said, hey, look, these 2 guys here, they played a great game. They own up to their mistakes. They take responsibility. But this one game does not define who they are. And did you hear about that? And I really like that. And I think there's something important there where, that one game that they lost, it doesn't define their true potential or how far they can go. And I've even been listening to something, Nikki. There's a podcast called the Rich Roll Podcast, ROLL. And he had somebody on his show, if I'm remembering correctly, where he talked about how even the term potential or the idea, sometimes that can be a little bit limiting where, we tell our kids, well, you have a lot of potential.
Yes.
Well, I think we got to be careful even with that, with young people. Would you agree?
I do agree with that. Funny you should say that. The first person who popped into my head is, I met her several years ago at a business meeting, and her name is T Street. You remember T Street?
Yeah.
But T, she speaks all over the country to high school kids. And there was a time where she came to a Girl Talk camp, and she mentioned this. She mentioned how the word potential can cause limiting beliefs, especially in kids. Because like you said, we're used to people saying, oh, you have so much potential, okay, but what does potential even mean? Like, you have the potential to become a good wife, or you have you have the potential to become president of the United States, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's great. Potential is great. But you need to put something behind the potential.
Yeah.
Where's the drive going to come from? I think everyone has potential for something. But I just remember her talking to the kids about that, and I thought, I'd never thought about that before.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And there was another podcast I was listening to today. I actually sent a link to Nikki, and to someone else. It's called the What's Essential podcast by Greg McCowan. And he had a really interesting person on the show, and he was talking about how he doesn't really have like a paradigm for himself. Like people have certain paradigms about how they view themselves. And I think the point he was just trying to make is how sometimes that can be limiting as well. So I think that's something important for the audience to consider. And your journey, Nikki, being on a podcast, this started at the beginning of 2021, and it's continuing to evolve. And so I think some of these points of not just, limiting yourself to what you think your potential is and what your paradigm you think that might be. Like, okay, this is the only thing I can do.
Very true.
Well, that sometimes can get in the way of us kind of breaking through new ceilings and new opportunities. So I want to leave that for the audience here. And I just want to ask you, consider, has something been holding you back? It's interesting that people can be successful and yet they can still hold themselves back to potentially, and there's that word again, even more, right? I wonder what else I could do. Well, you have to at least give it a shot. So that's something that we're trying to encourage Joshua doing, right, Josh? Where you're trying new things and experimenting with new things. In fact, Josh wanted to share something with the audience. What would you like to share, Josh? You got to speak clearly.
I was going to share that sometime in May, I don't know the date yet, but sometime in May, I'm going to start a gaming channel, and I'm going to do a couple different things like Minecraft and Roblox and all that kind of stuff.
I love
it. Sometime in May.
Lord willing. All right.
Awesome.
In between May 5th and May 20th.
Wow, that's pretty detailed. That's actually really good. Great job, son.
Awesome.
So anyway, this is really experimenting with this. Check out the Nikki Lee podcast. Check out Joshua Lee's podcast coming up, Lord willing, in May.
I'm not going to make... it's a gaming channel on YouTube.
All right, never mind. Check out the gaming channel, okay? We need that clarity. And please, thank you for your support with this podcast. Now you can go to Spotify and watch the video of the podcast, or you can go to my YouTube channel, I Can Do with Benjamin Lee. All right, talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Take
Peace.
care.